The proposal. The council chamber of the United Galactic Alliance was enormous, yet the atmosphere felt suffocating. Delegates from over 50 different species sat in their assigned sections, their murmurs echoing off the sleek metallic walls. At the center of the room stood the Thranix delegation, towering over everyone else. The Thranix were giants -8 feet tall, with shimmering crystal-like skin that refracted light into 1,000 colors. Their golden eyes scanned the room, sharp and piercing, but their body language showed desperation. The leader of the Thranix, Elder Kalen, stepped forward. His voice boomed, reverberating across the chamber. "We come here not to demand, but to beg. Our species faces extinction. We can no longer reproduce naturally. Only with the help of a human can we survive." A wave of whispers swept through the room. Humans. Of all species, why humans? The Thranix were feared throughout the galaxy for their size, strength, and advanced technology. For them to ask for help was shocking enough. To involve humans in their reproduction was unthinkable. Kalen continued, his tone grave. "Our ancestors performed an ancient ritual, bonding our kind with another species to rekindle life. Your biology, humans, is the closest match to ours. Without this, the Thranix will be no more." At this, the murmurs turned into open objections. A reptilian delegate hissed, "This is madness. Humans are fragile creatures. They cannot handle the complexity of Thranix rituals." Another voice, this one from a bird-like species, chirped, "How can we trust them? Humans are unpredictable." Sitting in the human delegation, Commander Jack Arden felt the weight of every eye in the room shift toward him and his colleagues. Jack was a decorated officer, known for his courage and quick thinking. But even he felt a lump in his throat at the proposal. No one had prepared him for something like this. The human representative, Ambassador Lee, stood and addressed the council. "This request is unprecedented. While humanity values life and cooperation, such a proposal requires careful consideration." Elder Kalen turned to her, his golden eyes softening. "There is no time for delay. If no human volunteers, the Thranix will cease to exist. Is there no one among your kind brave enough to step forward?" The room fell silent. Every human delegate sat frozen, avoiding eye contact. Jack's mind raced. The Thranix were terrifying, but their plight was undeniable. He thought of their words. Extinction, no more. It wasn't just about one species. It was about life itself. Could he let them vanish without trying to help? Finally, Jack stood. His heart pounded, but his voice was steady. "I'll do it." Gasps rippled through the chamber. Jack felt the stares of disbelief from his fellow humans and the other delegates. Ambassador Lei turned to him, her face pale. "Commander, do you understand what you're volunteering for?" Jack nodded, though he wasn't entirely sure himself. "Someone has to step up. If it's not me, then who?" Elder Kalen's eyes brightened, a glimmer of hope replacing the despair. He bowed deeply, a gesture of immense respect in Thranix culture. "Human, you do not yet understand the honor and responsibility you have taken upon yourself. Your courage will be remembered for generations." As the murmurs died down, Jack felt a strange mix of emotions. Pride, fear, and an overwhelming sense of uncertainty. What had he just agreed to? The Thranix were known for their mysterious rituals, but no details had been shared. What would this bonding process entail? Would he even survive it? After the council adjourned, Jack was escorted to a private chamber where Elder Kalen waited. The elder looked down at him, his expression unreadable. "You have done what no other human dared. You have chosen to stand with us when we were at our weakest. But you must understand, this path is not easy. The ritual will test your mind, body, and soul. Are you truly prepared?" Jack hesitated for a moment, but then met Kalen's gaze. "I don't know what lies ahead, but I've faced impossible odds before. If it means saving your people, I'll do whatever it takes." Kalen placed a massive hand on Jack's shoulder, the touch surprisingly gentle. "Then we shall begin preparations. Tomorrow, You will meet Zyra, the one chosen to bond with you. She is our strongest and most revered, but she has also suffered greatly. Winning her trust will not be easy." Jack swallowed hard. "I'll do my best." Kaelin's eyes glowed faintly, a sign of his approval. "Your best may be more than enough, human. You may be the key to saving us all." As Jack lay in his temporary quarters that night, he stared at the ceiling, his mind racing with questions. Who was Zyra? What kind of challenges awaited him? And why did he feel like this mission was about more than just saving a species? Something about it felt bigger, as if his decision had set something greater into motion. He closed his eyes, determined to face whatever came next. Little did he know, this choice would change not only the Thranics but his own life forever. Meeting the giant. The next morning, Jack woke early, his mind buzzing with unease. The Thranics mothership, where he was now housed, felt alive. Its walls shimmered faintly, pulsing with soft light, as if the ship itself were breathing. He followed his escort, a smaller Thranix with emerald-colored skin, through winding corridors that seemed to rearrange themselves as they walked. "Your destination adapts," the guide explained, noticing Jack's puzzled expression. "Our ships are not built, they grow." Jack nodded, his apprehension growing. The Thranics were unlike anything he'd encountered before, even in his years of dealing with alien races. Their technology wasn't just advanced, it felt alive. And now, he was about to meet one of their most revered individuals, Zyra. The guide stopped before an immense door made of translucent material, glowing softly with a golden hue. "She awaits," the guide said, bowing slightly before stepping back. Jack took a deep breath and stepped inside. The chamber was vast, with walls that seemed to stretch endlessly upward, reflecting the light like a kaleidoscope. At the center stood Zyra. She was magnificent and terrifying. Standing over 8 feet tall, her crystalline skin sparkled like 1,000 diamonds, casting refracted rainbows across the room. Her eyes, golden and fierce, locked onto Jack the moment he entered. She didn't move, her posture rigid, but her presence filled the room. For a moment, neither spoke. Jack took in her appearance. The sharp, angular lines of her features, the faint glow emanating from her body, and the way her translucent form seemed to shift subtly, as though she were made of flowing energy rather than flesh. Despite her alien nature, there was an undeniable elegance about her. "You are the human who volunteered," she said at last. Her voice was deep and resonant, yet it carried a musical quality, like wind chimes in a storm. Jack straightened his shoulders. "I am. My name is Commander Jack Harden." She tilted her head, studying him like one might study a curious insect. "You are smaller than I expected." Jack couldn't help but smirk. "And you're taller than I expected." To his surprise, a faint smile tugged at the corner of her lips, but it vanished just as quickly. "Do you understand the gravity of what you've agreed to, human?" "I understand enough," Jack replied, though he wasn't entirely sure that was true. "Your people need help, and I'm here to give it." Zyra took a step closer, and Jack instinctively took a step back. Her presence was overwhelming up close. Her crystalline skin emitted a faint hum, a vibration that Jack could feel in his chest. "You speak of help, but this is not charity," she said, her tone sharp. "The bond is not simply a task. It will tie us together, mind, body, and soul. Once it begins, there is no undoing it. Are you truly prepared for that?" Jack hesitated. The truth was, he didn't know if he was prepared. But he also knew he couldn't back down now. "I wouldn't be here if I wasn't ready to try." Zyra's golden eyes softened slightly, but there was still a shadow of doubt in her expression. "Humans are fragile, emotional, unpredictable. I have seen your kind's wars, your destruction, your chaos. Why should I trust you to succeed where so many others would fail?" Jack felt a flicker of frustration, but kept his voice steady. "Because humans are also survivors. We endure, we adapt, And when we care about something, we fight for it with everything we have. Zera's gaze lingered on him for a long moment. Then she turned away, her crystalline form catching the light. We shall see, Commander. The ritual is not just a test of strength, but of will. You will face my memories, my pain, my burdens. If you cannot endure them, we will both be destroyed. The weight of her words settled heavily on Jack. He wanted to ask what she meant, but something in her tone told him she wouldn't explain further. Instead, he said, "Then I'll have to be strong enough for both of us." For the first time, Zera seemed genuinely intrigued. She turned back to him, her sharp features softening slightly. You speak boldly. Perhaps there is more to you than your size suggests. The tension in the room eased slightly, but it was replaced by something else, an unspoken challenge. Jack could feel it in the way Zera watched him, as though she were trying to see through his bravado to the person underneath. Rest now, she said finally. Tomorrow, the elders will begin the ritual. You'll need all the strength you can muster. Jack nodded, though he didn't feel the least bit ready to rest. As he left the chamber, he couldn't shake the feeling that meeting Zera was only the beginning. She was more than just a partner in this mission. She was a puzzle, a force of nature, and perhaps the key to everything. As he walked back to his quarters, he thought about her words. You will face my memories, my pain, my burdens. What kind of life had she lived to carry such weight? And what would it mean for him to share it? For now, all he could do was prepare for whatever came next. But deep down, Jack knew this was far more than a mission. It was a test of his humanity itself. The ritual begins. The next day came faster than Jack expected. A soft chime woke him, and the emerald-skinned Thranix guide returned to escort him to the ritual chamber. Jack's stomach churned with unease. He had faced death on battlefields, survived impossible odds. But this felt different. It wasn't just his life at stake. It was an entire species, their survival balanced on the edge of an alien ritual he didn't understand. The guide led him into a chamber unlike anything Jack had ever seen. It was circular, with walls that seemed to ripple like liquid gold. The air shimmered, charged with energy that made the hair on his arms stand on end. At the center of the room was a raised platform, its surface covered in glowing, intricate patterns that pulsed rhythmically, like a heartbeat. Elder Kalon and Zera were already there, flanked by other Thranix elders who hummed in unison, their voices resonating in a strange, hypnotic melody. Zera stood tall and resolute, but there was a flicker of unease in her golden eyes as she glanced at Jack. You are here, Kalon said, his voice heavy with purpose. The bonding ritual is ancient, sacred, and unforgiving. It will test you in ways you cannot imagine, human. If your resolve falters, both you and Zera will perish. Jack swallowed hard. Understood. What do I need to do? Kalon extended a long crystalline hand toward the platform. Step forward. The platform will read your essence, your mind, body, and soul. It will open a gateway where your consciousness and Zera's will merge. If you survive, the bond will be complete, and new life will flow through the Thranix. Zera stepped forward, her gaze fixed on Jack. The bond is more than a sharing of thoughts or feelings. It is a merging of who we are at our core. My memories will become yours, as will my burdens. You will see me as I truly am, and I will see you. Jack nodded, though the weight of her words made his chest tighten. I'm ready. He stepped onto the platform, and as soon as his boots touched the glowing surface, a surge of energy shot through him. It was like stepping into a storm, wild, chaotic, and alive. The patterns on the platform flared brighter, swirling faster as if reacting to his presence. Zera joined him, standing just a few feet away, her crystalline form shimmering with anticipation. Close your eyes, Kalon instructed. Let the platform guide you. Jack obeyed, and the moment his eyes shut, the world fell away. Jack found himself standing in a vast, alien landscape. The sky was a swirling mix of gold and black, and the ground beneath his feet felt soft and warm, like it was alive. He turned to see Zira beside him, but she looked different. Her crystalline form was fractured, her glow dimmer, and her eyes were filled with pain. "This is my mind," Zira said, her voice echoing around them. "Here, you will see what I carry." Before Jack could respond, the landscape shifted violently. Suddenly, they were in the middle of a battlefield. Towering Thranix warriors clashed with shadowy, monstrous figures that moved like smoke. The air was thick with the sound of screams and the clash of crystalline weapons. Jack could feel the heat of explosions, the sting of ash in his lungs. "This is the war that destroyed us," Zira said, her voice trembling. "We fought for centuries, but it was not enough. Our enemies consumed everything, our homes, our people, our hope." Jack turned to her, his heart pounding. "But you survived." Zira nodded, her golden eyes filled with guilt. "At a cost. I was chosen to carry the legacy of my people, to ensure our survival. But the weight of that burden, it is more than I can bear alone." The scene changed again. Now they stood in a barren wasteland, the remnants of Thranix cities scattered like broken glass. Jack could feel Zira's despair, her isolation. It hit him like a physical blow, nearly knocking him to his knees. "You feel it, don't you?" Zira said, her voice softer now. "The pain, the loss, the responsibility. This is what I carry every day." Jack clenched his fists, struggling to steady himself. "You're not alone anymore. I'm here." Zira looked at him, and for the first time, there was a flicker of hope in her gaze. "If you mean those words, human, then prove it. Open your mind. Show me your truth." Jack hesitated. He knew what she was asking, to let her see his memories, his pain. He had spent years burying his guilt, locking it away so he could function. But now, there was no hiding. The bond required complete honesty. He closed his eyes, and suddenly they were standing in a small earth home. It was warm and bright, filled with the sound of laughter. Jack saw himself, younger, holding hands with a woman whose face glowed with joy. Beside her was a cradle, rocking gently. The scene was peaceful, perfect. And then it shattered. The home was gone, replaced by fire and rubble. Jack stood in the ruins, clutching the lifeless body of the woman, his screams echoing into the void. The cradle lay overturned, empty. "This is my truth," Jack said, his voice shaking. "I lost them. My wife, my child. I couldn't save them, and I've spent every day since trying to make up for it." Zira stepped closer, her gaze softening. "You carry guilt, just as I do. But guilt is not a burden to bear alone. Together, perhaps we can carry each other." The world around them began to glow, the golden light growing brighter and warmer. Jack felt a pull, as though their minds were weaving together, their pain and strength becoming one. The bond was forming. But then, a sudden jolt ripped through the connection. The battlefield reappeared, darker and more chaotic. A shadowy figure emerged, its form shifting and writhing. It lunged toward them, its smoky tendrils reaching for Jack. "What is that?" Jack shouted, trying to move but finding himself frozen. Zira's voice was filled with fear. "It is my doubt. My fear. It has taken shape." A shadow loomed closer, its presence suffocating. Jack's heart pounded as he struggled to think of a way to fight back. This wasn't just about him or Zira. This was about survival, for both of them. "You're not facing this alone anymore," Jack said, his voice firm. "We fight it together." He reached for Zira's hand, their fingers interlocking. The moment their hands touched, a surge of energy erupted from the ground, blasting the shadow back. The golden light intensified, driving the darkness away. The bond was complete. Jack opened his eyes, gasping for air. He was back in the ritual chamber, his body trembling from the experience. Zira stood before him, her golden eyes brighter than before. "You did it," Kalen said, his voice filled with awe. The bond has been forged. Jack looked at Zaira, and for the first time, she smiled. A real, genuine smile. You are stronger than I believed, human. Perhaps together, we can save more than just my people. But even as Jack stood there, the memory of the shadow lingered. The bond was complete, but the battle was far from over. The human heart. The aftermath of the ritual left Jack physically drained, but it was the emotional toll that hit him hardest. The bond between him and Zaira was unlike anything he had experienced before. He could feel her presence in his mind, a quiet but persistent hum of thoughts, emotions, and memories that weren't his own. It was as if her soul had merged with his, and it left him exposed in ways he hadn't anticipated. "You're quiet," Zaira said, her voice cutting through the silence as they walked side by side down a shimmering corridor. Her crystalline form glowed faintly, but Jack could sense the undercurrent of tension in her. "You haven't spoken since the ritual ended. Do you regret it?" Jack shook his head, though his voice faltered when he answered. "No, I don't regret it. I just wasn't ready for how much this would change me." Zaira stopped walking and turned to face him. Her golden eyes locked onto his, piercing but not unkind. "The bond changes us both, Jack. You see my memories, my struggles. But now, I see yours as well." Jack stiffened. He had hoped to avoid this conversation, but there was no hiding from Zaira now. She knew about the darkest moments of his life, the day he lost his wife and child. He could feel her knowledge of it like a shadow pressing against his mind. "You carry so much guilt," Zaira said softly. Her tone lacked judgment, but it was heavy with understanding. "You blame yourself for their deaths." Jack clenched his fists, his jaw tightening. "Because it was my fault. I was supposed to protect them, and I failed." Zaira stepped closer, her towering figure casting a shadow over him. "You think you are the only one who has failed." Her voice grew sharper, tinged with anger. "I watched my entire species fall into ruin. I was powerless to stop it. I am the last hope of my people, and even now, I question if I am enough. We both carry burdens, Jack, but blaming yourself will not change the past." Jack met her gaze, his frustration boiling over. "It's not that simple. You don't understand what it's like to lose everything you love, to know you could have done more." "I do understand." Zaira's voice thundered, echoing through the corridor. The walls seemed to hum in response, their energy mirroring her anger. "Every day, I carry the memories of my people, my family, who trusted me to save them. And every day, I live with the knowledge that I failed them." Her words hung in the air, heavy and raw. Jack looked at her, his anger fading as he saw the pain in her eyes. It was the same pain he carried, the same weight of guilt and loss. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't empty. It was filled with the unspoken understanding that they were more alike than they had realized. Later that evening, they sat together in a small chamber. The Thranik ship's walls glowed softly, casting a warm light over the room. Zaira sat cross-legged, her crystalline form reflecting the light like a living sculpture. Jack leaned against the wall, his head tilted back, eyes closed. "I never expected this," Jack said after a long silence. "I thought I was just helping your people survive. I didn't realize I'd have to face my own demons in the process." Zaira tilted her head, her gaze thoughtful. "The bond does not allow us to hide. It forces us to confront the truths we bury about ourselves and each other." Jack opened his eyes and looked at her. "Do you ever wonder if it's worth it? Carrying all this pain, all this guilt. Do you ever feel like giving up?" Zaira was quiet for a moment, her golden eyes reflecting the light like molten fire. "I have thought about it," she admitted. "But every time I do, I remember what is at stake. My people trusted me with their legacy. If I give up, they will truly be gone. And now, Jack, it is not just about my people. It is about us." Jack frowned. "Us?" Zaira nodded. "The bond is not just a connection between two beings. It is a partnership. We are stronger together than we are alone." If we carry each other's burdens, perhaps we can find a way forward." Her words struck a chord in Jack. For so long, he had carried his guilt alone, refusing to let anyone else shoulder the weight. But now, for the first time, he felt the possibility of something different. Maybe he didn't have to face it all by himself. The moment was interrupted by a low hum that reverberated through the ship. Jack sat up, alert. Zyra's form stiffened, her eyes narrowing. "What is it?" Jack asked, his voice tense. "Trouble," Zyra said, rising to her feet. "The bond has awakened something unexpected." Before Jack could ask what she meant, the door to the chamber slid open, revealing Elder Kalen. His expression was grave, his golden eyes glowing with urgency. "You must come at once," Kalen said. "The rebel faction has learned of the bond. They see it as a threat to our people's purity, and have begun to act against it." Jack exchanged a glance with Zyra, his pulse quickening. "What are they planning?" Kalen's voice was grim. "They intend to sever the bond, by any means necessary." Jack's mind raced. The bond wasn't just a connection between him and Zyra. It was the foundation of the Thranix's survival. If the rebels succeeded, it wouldn't just destroy the bond. It would doom the entire species. "We won't let that happen," Jack said, rising to his feet. "They'll have to go through us first." Zyra's gaze hardened, and a faint glow emanated from her crystalline skin. "Then we fight together, human, as one." For the first time, Jack felt a flicker of something new. Hope. Not just for the Thranix, but for himself. The bond wasn't just about survival, it was about redemption. And he wasn't about to let anyone take that away. As they followed Kalen into the depths of the ship, Jack felt the bond between him and Zyra strengthen. They were no longer two individuals fighting separate battles. They were partners, bound by a shared purpose. And together, they would face whatever came next, fighting for survival. The corridors of the Thranix ship pulsed with urgency, the golden glow of its living walls dimming as if reflecting the growing tension. Jack and Zyra followed Elder Kalen, their footsteps quick and quiet. Jack's heart pounded, a mix of adrenaline and dread coursing through his veins. "What exactly are the rebels planning?" Jack asked, breaking the silence. Kalen didn't turn, his voice sharp and focused. "They believe the bond you share with Zyra is a corruption of our traditions. They claim it taints our lineage. Their leader, Vorin, seeks to disrupt the process by attacking the ship's core. If they succeed, the mothership, and everyone aboard, will be destroyed." Jack cursed under his breath. "How many of them are there?" "Enough to be dangerous," Kalen replied. "But they are not the only threat." Jack frowned. "What do you mean?" Zyra, walking beside him, answered, her voice tense. "The bond has awakened ancient energies within the ship. These energies are linked to my people's life force, and they are unstable. If the rebels damage the core, they could unleash something far worse than an explosion." Jack felt a chill run down his spine. Worse than an explosion. Like what? "Like the collapse of the Thranix legacy," Zyra said, her golden eyes flickering with unease. "The core holds the memories and essence of every Thranix who has lived. If it is destroyed, all that remains of my people will be lost forever." They arrived at the central chamber, a towering space dominated by the core, a massive crystalline structure suspended in the air, glowing with shifting colors that seemed alive. Around the core, a group of Thranix rebels moved with precision, their crystalline weapons glinting in the dim light. Vorin, the rebel leader, stood at the forefront. His form was larger than most, his emerald-green skin darkened by the crimson glow of his anger. His voice boomed across the chamber. "You dare to defile our traditions, Zyra. This bond with a human is an insult to everything the Thranix stand for." Zyra stepped forward, her crystalline skin glowing brighter. "And doing nothing will ensure our extinction, Vorin. Is that the legacy you wish to leave?" Vorin sneered, his golden eyes narrowing. "Better extinction than corruption." Jack tightened his grip on the alien weapon Kalon had handed him earlier, its weight unfamiliar but comforting. He stepped beside Zaira, his voice steady. I don't know much about your traditions, Vorin, but I do know this. Survival is more important than pride. If you destroy this core, you're not saving your people, you're dooming them. Vorin's gaze shifted to Jack, his expression darkening. You think a human can lecture me on the survival of my species? You are nothing but a parasite. Before Jack could respond, Vorin raised his arm, and the rebels charged. The fight erupted with brutal intensity. The rebels moved with fluid grace, their crystalline bodies glinting as they struck with precision. Jack ducked under a blow from one of them, the alien weapon in his hands humming as he swung it upward, deflecting the attack. Sparks flew as the weapons clashed, the air crackling with energy. Zaira was a force of nature. Her towering form moved with a mix of power and elegance, her crystalline limbs glowing brighter as she fought. She struck one rebel with a swift, calculated blow, sending him sprawling across the chamber. Her voice rang out, commanding and resolute. You fight to destroy what remains of us. Stand down before it's too late. But the rebels were relentless, their determination as sharp as their weapons. Jack found himself cornered by two of them, their movements synchronized. He blocked one strike, then another, but they were faster and stronger. Just as one of them raised a weapon to strike, Zaira appeared, her massive arm sweeping the attacker aside with a single powerful blow. Focus, human, she said, her tone stern but protective. We fight together. Jack nodded, his grip tightening on the weapon. Got it. As the battle raged, the core began to glow brighter, its shifting colors growing more erratic. Jack noticed the floor beneath him starting to vibrate, a low hum building in intensity. What's happening to the core? He shouted to Kalon, who was defending the chamber entrance. The energies are destabilizing. Kalon yelled back. If this continues, the core will overload. Zaira turned to Vorin, her voice echoing with authority. Stop this madness, Vorin. If the core collapses, our people's legacy will be erased. Is that what you want? Vorin hesitated, his golden eyes flickering with uncertainty. But then his expression hardened. Your bond with the human is the true collapse of our legacy. I will not allow it to stand. He lunged toward the core, a crystalline blade in his hand. Jack's instincts kicked in. Without thinking, he threw himself into Vorin's path, the alien weapon in his hand deflecting the blade just inches from the core. The impact sent Jack sprawling to the ground, his weapon clattering away. Vorin loomed over him, his blade raised for the final strike. But before Vorin could deliver the blow, Zaira intervened. She grabbed Vorin's arm, her grip unyielding. Enough, Vorin. This ends now. Vorin snarled, but Zaira's strength overwhelmed him. She twisted his arm, forcing him to drop the blade. He fell to his knees, defeated. The room fell silent except for the hum of the core, which slowly stabilized as the conflict ceased. Jack staggered to his feet, his breathing heavy. He looked at Zaira, who stood tall and resolute, her golden eyes fixed on Vorin. You were willing to destroy everything out of fear, Zaira said, her voice filled with both sorrow and anger. But fear does not lead us forward. Courage does. Vorin glared at her but said nothing. The other rebels lowered their weapons, their resolve shaken by their leader's defeat. Kalon stepped forward, his expression grave. You have endangered us all. Vorin, your actions will not be forgotten. Zaira turned to Jack, her gaze softening. You risked your life to protect the core. You fought for my people as if they were your own. Jack managed a tired smile. That's what partners do, right? For the first time, Zaira smiled, a small, genuine smile that reflected the light of the core. Yes, Jack, that's what partners do. But even as the immediate danger passed, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that this victory was only temporary. The bond had survived, but the shadows of doubt and division still lingered. The fight for the Thranix legacy was far from over. The final bond. The tension in the chamber had settled, but the air still crackled with the residual energy of the core. The rebels had been subdued, and Vorin sat restrained, his expression a mixture of defeat and defiance. Jack leaned against a pillar, catching his breath, while Zira stood at the core, her crystalline skin dimming as the glow from the massive structure steadied. But Kalen's voice cut through the momentary calm. The core remains unstable. The bond is incomplete. Jack straightened, his chest tightening. What do you mean incomplete? We did the ritual. We fought the rebels. What else is left? Kalen turned to Zira, his golden eyes heavy with concern. The bond has connected your minds and shared your burdens, but it has not yet merged your essences. Without this final step, the core will fail, and the Thranix legacy will collapse. Zira's expression hardened. The final bond requires more than courage. It demands sacrifice. Jack's heart sank. What kind of sacrifice? Kalen hesitated, as if weighing the weight of his words. Your humanity. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Jack stared at Kalen, disbelief flashing across his face. My humanity. What does that even mean? Zira turned to him, her golden eyes filled with a rare softness. The bond requires one of us to give up part of who we are to sustain the connection. For me, it would mean relinquishing my individuality, becoming a vessel for the collective will of the Thranix. For you, Jack finished her thought, his voice barely a whisper, it would mean giving up what makes me human. Kalen stepped forward, his expression resolute. The choice must be made quickly. The core cannot sustain itself for long in this state. Jack ran a hand through his hair, his mind racing. Every instinct screamed at him to turn back, to walk away from this impossible choice. But then he looked at Zira, standing tall despite the weight she carried, her crystalline form shimmering faintly in the light of the core. She had been willing to sacrifice everything to save her people. Could he do any less? What happens if I choose to give up my humanity? Jack asked, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. Zira hesitated. You would no longer be entirely human. The bond would transform you, blending your essence with mine. You would become something new, a bridge between our species. Jack let out a shaky breath. And if you're the one who sacrifices, I would become a living memory, Zira said, her tone even but laced with sadness. I would no longer be myself. I would exist only to sustain the core and the legacy of my people. The weight of the decision pressed down on Jack like a physical force. He had always prided himself on his humanity, his resilience, his ability to adapt, his determination to survive. But now, survival wasn't just about him. It was about an entire species and the bond he had formed with Zira. I won't let you lose yourself, Jack said finally, his voice firm. You've already given so much. This is my turn. Zira's eyes widened, a flicker of emotion breaking through her stoic exterior. Jack, you don't understand what you're giving up. I do, Jack said, stepping closer to her. I've spent my whole life trying to outrun my guilt, my pain. But this bond, it's shown me that survival isn't about running. It's about facing what's in front of you, no matter how hard it is. If I can save your people and give you a chance to live your life, then it's worth it. Kalen motioned for Jack to approach the core. The crystalline structure pulsed faintly, its light growing dimmer with each passing second. Place your hand on the core, Kalen instructed. The bond will take what it needs. Zira stepped forward, her hand gently resting on Jack's shoulder. You don't have to do this alone. Jack turned to her, a small smile tugging at his lips. That's the point of the bond, isn't it? We're never alone. Zira nodded, her expression softening. Then let me share this burden with you. Together, they placed their hands on the core. The moment their skin touched the shimmering surface, a surge of energy shot through them, blinding and overwhelming. Jack felt his mind pulled into a swirling vortex of light and sound. Memories, both his and Zyra's, flashed before him in rapid succession. He saw Zyra as a child, playing among the crystalline forests of her homeworld. He saw her standing on a battlefield, her people falling around her. And then he saw himself, holding his wife's hand, cradling his newborn daughter, and finally, standing amidst the ruins of his life. The energy grew stronger, more intense. Jack could feel something shifting inside him, something fundamental. His body trembled, his senses overwhelmed. But through it all, he felt Zyra's presence, steady and reassuring. "You're not alone, Jack," she said, her voice echoing in his mind. "We are in this together." When the light finally subsided, Jack opened his eyes. The core was glowing brightly again, its colors vibrant and alive. The chamber was quiet, the rebels subdued and watching in stunned silence. Jack looked down at his hands and saw that they were no longer entirely human. They shimmered faintly, their surface taking on a crystalline quality that mirrored Zyra's. He turned to Zyra, who stood beside him, her golden eyes filled with awe. "You've changed," she said softly. "So have you," Jack replied, his voice carrying a strange resonance. He could feel the bond between them stronger than ever, a connection that went beyond words. Kalen stepped forward, his expression filled with reverence. "The bond is complete. You are no longer just human or Thranix. You are something new, a symbol of unity." Jack looked at Zyra, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Guess we're in this for the long haul, huh?" Zyra smiled back, her crystalline skin glowing faintly. "It seems so, partner." But even as the core stabilized and the rebels were led away, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The bond had saved the Thranix, but it had also created something entirely new. And with it, a future that neither human nor Thranix could fully predict. A new beginning. The core chamber hummed with a vibrant energy that hadn't been felt in centuries. Its crystalline structure pulsed in harmony with Jack and Zyra, who stood side by side, their bond now a living bridge between two species. The rebels had been subdued, but the weight of their distrust lingered in the air like a storm cloud. Elder Kalon approached, his towering form casting a long shadow. "The bond is complete, but the path forward is fraught with uncertainty. Jack Arden, you are no longer entirely human. Zyra, you are no longer entirely Thranix. You have become something unprecedented." Jack glanced at his hands, which shimmered faintly in the light. The crystalline transformation wasn't just physical, he could feel it in his mind, a deeper connection to the ship, the core. And most of all, Zyra. Her thoughts brushed against his, not intrusive but present, like a reassuring whisper in the back of his mind. "What happens now?" Jack asked, his voice carrying a subtle resonance that hadn't been there before. Kalen's golden eyes dimmed slightly, as if weighed down by the gravity of his response. "The bond has stabilized the core, but it has also set a precedent that many will fear. Not all Thranix will accept this union, just as not all humans will understand it." Zyra stepped forward, her voice steady. "Then we show them what is possible. The bond isn't a corruption. It's a new beginning. Together, we can lead both our peoples into a future where survival is not dictated by isolation, but by unity." Jack nodded, the conviction in her words strengthening his own resolve. "If we can overcome everything we faced, our doubts, the rebels, the ritual, then we can face whatever comes next. But we'll need allies, on both sides." Kalon studied them for a moment before bowing his head. "You have my support, but the path you walk will not be easy. The galaxy is not kind to those who challenge tradition." As Jack and Zyra prepared to leave the core chamber, a soft vibration rippled through the ship. The walls shimmered, and Jack felt a strange sensation, as if the ship itself was acknowledging him. He turned to Zyra, who seemed to sense the same thing. "The ship recognizes you now," she said, her voice tinged with wonder. "You are connected to it as deeply as any Thranix. It will respond to your presence." Jack raised an eyebrow. So I can talk to the ship. Not in words, Zyra explained. But it will feel your intent, your emotions. It is alive in ways your human ships are not. Testing her claim, Jack focused on the ship's vibrations, silently willing it to guide them to a place of calm. To his surprise, the walls glowed brighter, and the air grew warmer, less tense. Zyra smiled. You're learning quickly. Jack chuckled, though the weight of what lay ahead tempered his amusement. Yeah, well, I've got a good teacher. As they walked through the ship, the Thranix crew and even some rebels watched them with mixed expressions. Curiosity, awe, suspicion. Vorin, still bound but now subdued, locked eyes with Jack as they passed. You think this bond will save us, Vorin growled, his voice low and bitter. But it is an abomination. You cannot force our people to accept this. Jack stopped, his crystalline hand resting on the wall. I'm not forcing anyone, but I won't let fear destroy what we've built here. You can fight it, or you can help us build something better. The choice is yours. Vorin's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing. Jack turned and continued walking, Zyra silently at his side. Back on Earth, things weren't any simpler. The United Galactic Alliance had been monitoring the situation, and Jack's transformation hadn't gone unnoticed. The human delegation was waiting when Jack and Zyra returned to the neutral station orbiting the planet. Ambassador Lee, her usually composed demeanor faltering, stared at Jack as if seeing a ghost. Commander Arden, what happened to you? Jack hesitated, unsure how to explain. The bond changed me. I'm still me, but I'm more. Leigh's eyes flicked to Zyra, her expression unreadable. And the Thranix. Are they stable now? Zyra stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. The bond has saved our people, for now. But stability depends on more than survival. It depends on trust, understanding, and cooperation between humans and Thranix. Leigh's gaze hardened. That's easier said than done. There are those who see this bond as a threat. They'll use it as a reason to push for isolation, maybe even conflict. Jack met her eyes, his resolve unwavering. Then we show them they're wrong. The bond isn't just about saving one species. It's about proving we're stronger together. And if we can't convince them with words, we'll convince them with actions. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. Jack and Zyra worked tirelessly, meeting with leaders, calming fears, and bridging the gap between two very different worlds. Some resisted, clinging to old prejudices and fears, but others began to see the possibilities. Jack's transformation became a symbol, a reminder that change was possible, even in the face of overwhelming odds. For humans, he represented the courage to embrace the unknown. For the Thranix, he was proof that survival didn't mean sacrificing their future, but embracing it. One night, aboard the Thranix mothership, Jack stood on a balcony overlooking the ship's crystalline expanse. The stars outside shimmered like scattered diamonds, and the hum of the ship resonated in his chest. Zyra joined him, her presence as steady as the bond they shared. You're quiet tonight. Jack smiled faintly, just thinking about everything we've been through, everything that's ahead. Zyra tilted her head, her golden eyes studying him. Do you regret it? Giving up part of your humanity? Jack shook his head. No, because I didn't lose it. If anything, I think I found what it really means to be human. To fight for something bigger than yourself. To believe in hope, even when it feels impossible. Zyra's crystalline skin glowed faintly as she smiled. Then we'll face the future together. As one. As they stood side by side, the stars stretching endlessly before them, Jack felt a quiet certainty settle in his chest. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but the bond they had forged, between human and Thranix, between two unlikely partners, was strong enough to withstand whatever came next. Together, they had created something new, something powerful, and for the first time in a long time, Jack felt ready to face whatever the universe had to offer.